Hey everybody, happy Thursday. For those of you that are new, my name is Susan. I am a freelance fiction editor specializing in sci-fi, fantasy, and romance. And today we're going to talk about, should you start your story with action? A great debate in all storytelling is, where should your story start? There is no right way because every story is different and has different needs. But one of the most popular solutions is to start your story with an action scene. So let's discuss the different types of action, the pros and the cons. When I say action, the first thing that probably comes to your mind is a fight scene, whether that be sword fighting, an epic gun battle, or a war, and you'd be right. But when talking about action in writing craft terms, this isn't the only option. Action can be more broadly looked at as anything outside of narrative prose, like description, internal voice, etc. So your action could also be individual action, so maybe the main character is sneaking through the city, or interaction, so conversations and dialogue. Maybe two characters are having a conversation, or maybe they're having a conversation while sneaking through the city. There are so many different ways to mix and match. So what are the benefits to starting your story this way? Why do so many choose to do so? First and foremost, it's eye-catching. So many authors worry about grabbing the reader's attention and getting them into the story. Starting your story with someone getting stabbed, running from a bad guy, or blackmailing someone, definitely going to get that attention and bring up questions to keep the reader invested in your story. Second, it sets you up for a fast-paced chapter. A big issue with many beginnings, especially if you're writing science fiction or fantasy, is that they can feel very slow. You have a lot to show the reader, to introduce them to, since you're not only describing new characters, but also explaining whole new worlds, politics, and magic systems. It can be a lot, especially first things, so starting off with action can really help the reader dive in before getting to the nitty-gritty details. Third, it can be a great way to show things about your character versus just telling the reader about them. You can see the main character's thoughts, feelings, and interactions firsthand to learn how they feel about their situation, other characters, or just hear the main character's voice, versus telling the reader about them. Especially through dialogue, this is a great way to show descriptions and add in world building even amidst an action scene. So there are so many great reasons to start with action. Why would you do anything else? Well, there are some cons as well. Throwing a reader in mid-action can be eye-catching, but it can also be overwhelming. The reader is not only trying to learn the who, what, where of the story, but they're also trying to track all of that action, interaction, and possibly underlying insinuation or tone of the scene. Depending on the complexity of the story and that scene, this can cause more issues than it solves if it gets too complicated for readers to follow. Tying to that, it can also be confusing. Readers need a solid and relatively quick understanding of who the main character is, where we are, so the setting, and the general idea of the feel of the story. Is it urban, paranormal, romance, what is it? So if you're too focused on the action, or the action doesn't naturally lend itself to showing these details, especially if the story is told in first-person point of view, so you don't have that distance of the third person, it can be hard to show this without just stating facts, without just telling, while still balancing that action, which can then make the scene feel a bit clunky, even during a great fight scene. And finally, starting with an action scene can make it tempting to skip the introduction altogether. Plotting-wise, you have the introduction part of your story, which then leads to the inciting incident, the beat or point that starts off the main plot. So for a romance, the inciting incident could be the two lovers meeting or arguing for the first time. For a fantasy or sci-fi story, it could be the main character heading off on their journey or being discovered as the chosen one. When authors start with action, many times the temptation is to jump in with the inciting incident, which makes sense at first. It's probably a powerful action scene that immediately dives into the great hook of your story, so it's showing a lot to the reader, so why wouldn't you want to do that? But in doing this, you miss a lot of the basic building blocks of the story that the readers really need to be able to dive in and relate to the characters and learn the world before having them head out on the journey. So, should you start your story with action? It's really up to you. There are some great reasons for and against it, and it really just depends on the needs of your story and your preferences as the author, as well as the expectations of the market if you choose to consider that. How did you start your most recent story? What ended up being the first scene of your final draft? Let me know in the comments. If you have publishing or writing questions, I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, it really helps the channel. And until next time, keep writing.